Hello, welcome to Insight. Today on Insight, lawsuit at ICC, a case against Dr. Tedros Adhanom, Director General WHO, also a former executive committee member of TPLF. To discuss the lawsuit, we have invited an Ethiopia expert and an author, David Steinman. David Steinman, welcome.
Thank you.
Before we go to the lawsuit, I want to briefly explore your book. Your book is called Money, Blood, and Conscience. Can you give us a brief description of the book?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a historical novel which describes life in Ethiopia under the TPLF. It features a love story between an American and an Ethiopian. But I wrote it to combine investigative journalism and fiction in order to educate Westerners about Ethiopia's crisis. I thought that if I created an entertainment vehicle, that it would attract more people to the issue who might otherwise not be reading the news, but they might be interested in reading an exciting book, and so this would be a way to bring the news about Ethiopia to a wider Western audience than before. Also, there is a nonfiction, what we call an afterword, an author's message after the story that also provides some additional news analysis that hopefully will encourage Westerners to take a special interest in Ethiopia.
Is the book currently available at Amazon and on different websites?
Yes, it's available on Amazon and Kindle. So anyone can just Google the title Money, Blood, and Conscience, and they'll find it easily on Amazon.
Before I go again to the lawsuit, I want to give you an opportunity to relate how you came to like Ethiopians, to work with Ethiopians, I should say, and to love Ethiopia. How did you come to take note of Ethiopia?
Well, I was previously an advisor to the American National Security Council regarding a different dictator in another country, in Haiti. And my background was actually as an economist, but I decided to apply my training to democracy promotion. And I was originally contacted by Dr. Asrat Waldeus' family. This was around the late 1980s when Mengistu was still in power. And they asked me if I would take an interest in Ethiopia. And we became friends, and I was able to observe, and learn about what was going on over there. And it was something that engaged my sympathy. I was always very interested in poverty reduction, and had come from my economics training to believe that there was a connection that was not sufficiently appreciated between political reform and poverty reduction. And of course, Ethiopia was famous, for the famines. And as I came to learn about Ethiopia and its recent history, I came to believe that there was a very strong need for political reform in Ethiopia, democratization, in order to help the country develop the capacity to be able to solve its own problems and to feed itself. My work is primarily about empowering poor people. I believe that if the poor have more of a say in decisions that affect them, and if politicians have to be more accountable to the poor, they will make decisions that help the poor better. And so democracy is one way of empowering poor people to get more control over their government. So I thought that Ethiopia was badly in need of this type of a solution. And around that same time, of course, the TPLF then came into power, and they began to harass Dr. Asrat and put him in jail not long after that. And of course, I felt a great deal of sympathy for him because I admired him very much. And those were basically the factors that originally got me involved, with Ethiopia. And then, of course, it was a long story after that to try to work with the different opposition groups to try to promote the democratic reform that I believe the country needed, but unfortunately took a very, very long time to make progress with.
Mhm. So recently you filed a lawsuit with ICC against Dr. Tedros Adhanom. Maybe first, who is Dr. Tedros?
Dr. Tedros is a former TPLF official. I don't know if he's still formally a member of the TPLF, but he came out of the ranks of the TPLF, and he was deputy health minister 2003 to 2005. That's Western years. Then he was the health minister from 2005 to 2012. And then after the death of Meles Zenawi, he was appointed foreign minister, but he was also a member of the TPLF executive committee, which I believe only consisted of 11 people at the time. So between being the foreign minister and a member of the all-powerful executive committee, which was basically running the country, he was an extremely powerful EPRDF official until 2016. At the end of 2016, he resigned his positions to campaign for and be elected to become the Director General of the World Health Organization. And he has been the Director General of the World Health Organization ever since 2017.
Okay, so what are the charges that are in the lawsuit?
Okay. I should clarify that what I filed with the International Criminal Court, technically speaking, is a complaint. It's not the same as a lawsuit. The way it works is one files a complaint. It's like going to the police, and you can inform the police if you know that some crime has been committed. Then they will evaluate the complaint and then make their own decision as to whether they're going to open a formal investigation. So what I've done is the complaint part of it. The lawsuit would actually come later in the form of a criminal prosecution if the ICC decides on the basis of the complaint and on the basis of their investigation that they do want to go further with an arrest warrant. So at this point, it's technically speaking an ICC complaint. And as far as what is in the complaint, basically the complaint alleges that when Dr. Tedros was one of the top three officials of Ethiopia during the period from the end of 2012 until the end of 2016, that he was in a position of responsibility. He shared control with just a very small number of other people over the country's security forces and its civil service. Therefore, he is responsible in part for the actions of those subordinates. And during those 4 years, he did nothing to try to stop, prevent, or punish the crimes against humanity that the security forces, in particular, and proxies of the TPLF were carrying out. And therefore, under the Rome Statute, which is the treaty that the International Criminal Court enforces, he has what's called command or superior responsibility, meaning that the top officials are responsible for what their subordinates did. So basically, the complaint alleges that he knew that the security forces were carrying out murder, torture, arbitrary arrests, all types of terrible crimes. And also, the civil service was also imposing ethnic discrimination in the distribution of public investment and assistance. And he knew that these things would kill people. And he not only did nothing to try to stop it, but he actually took very specific actions which demonstrated his support for those crimes, and also showed that he was trying to defend and deflect international criticism in order to perpetrate the crimes in future. So the complaint basically alleges that he's responsible because he was in a position of command, and also that as an individual, he took specific actions that he had to know would also contribute to the commission of these crimes.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for the correction. I did not know that this is just a complaint. So, but to go back to Dr. Tedros, the complaint is role both as a member of the TPLF leadership and also as a minister, or just as a minister?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question, please?
So, is the complaint based on his work as a Minister of Health and Foreign Secretary, or is it also as a member of the Executive Committee of TPLF, which ruled the country for 27 years?
Both. It is limited to the period end of 2012 to end of 2016, and it's the combination of being the foreign minister and also being a member of the executive committee that made him so powerful. Independent analysts said that he was the third highest official in the government during that time. So, as the third highest official, it's impossible to escape a liability. Also, I should add that the complaint is a necessary part of beginning the process. So I would not term it merely a complaint because without the complaint, the process cannot begin. So the complaint is actually very important, and it has already succeeded in its secondary purpose, which is to alert the world to Dr. Tedros's hidden criminal past. The complaint has generated tremendous publicity around the world. It was on the front page of the London Times, it was in the Daily Mail, and it went viral. It's been in hundreds and hundreds of online and social media news outlets, so that the entire world now is aware of what Dr. Tedros did during those years, which is information that he and the WHO have tried very hard to keep secret from the West until now. So the complaint actually, has been effective with this consciousness-raising function, and of course, it is a necessary part of beginning the process of ICC evaluation. So I would not really use the adverb merely in front of it. I would like to hope, that it is an important event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, indeed, it is an important event. But as you said, it's not a lawsuit yet. So the next step, from what I understand, or maybe you can explain to us, is the ICC will depose him and look for additional information to verify the complaint, or what are the next steps?
Okay, the way it works now is the ICC will evaluate the complaint. And it's just like if you made a complaint to the police, they will evaluate it. And after they've completed their evaluation, then they will make a determination what to do. I have no control over what the ICC does ultimately decide. So they could decide that they will then open an investigation, or they could decide for whatever reason not to pursue it. We won't know until they respond. Of course, I and millions of other people are hoping that they will respond in a helpful way to it. But now the ball is in the ICC's court. We've done our part. Now we have to see if the ICC is willing to do its part.
So does the complaint include certain initial proofs of the alleged or the suspected crimes, or are there any proof
Yes.
to the complaint, with the complaint?
Yes, there's a lot of proof, in fact. Firstly, the proof is obvious because there's no question that Tedros, during those years, was a very high ranking Ethiopian official. There are objective analyses that do establish that he was one of the three highest leaders. Um, there also is voluminous evidence that the security forces during that period did engage in crimes that meet the definition of crimes against humanity. There were mass shootings, there was mass torture, there were mass incarcerations of innocent people, and so on. So the fact that the underlying crimes by the security forces are well documented by Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, U.S. Department of State annual human rights reports um, establish clearly that the crimes did happen, and it is what they say is a legal term, facially obvious, meaning that it's obvious on its face that Tedros was a very high-ranking official, and that the government had control over the security forces for much of that time and over certain proxies. So the evidence that he was responsible for the crimes of those security forces is obvious on its face. In addition, his efforts to defend and deflect um, and hide the crimes is on video. There are interviews and speeches that he's made in which he tries to mislead the West about what's really going on in Ethiopia. He tries to minimize and downplay the crimes against humanity, even tries to characterize the victims as criminals. So these are additional proofs that he was a supporter of the crimes that were going on. There's also a meeting that was witnessed by a former bodyguard of his, in which he negotiated the kidnapping of dissidents. So there is, quite a bit of evidence.
Mm-hmm. Given that he is the Director General of the World Health Organization, and given that other members of the TPLF leadership have not faced justice, why do you think the ICC will take it? The ICC in general, while a judicial entity, it is under heavy influence of the superpowers. And the superpowers allowed Dr. Tedros to become the Director General of WHO. So is it too naive of you to submit the complaint?
Well, we will have to see. There certainly have been instances in which the ICC has exercised considerable independence. It has done many things that the United States did not like. In fact, the United States, under President Trump, actually barred some of the ICC staff from entry into the United States. So we will have to see. And of course, the more publicity that the matter gets, the more public opinion that takes an interest in this, hopefully will also encourage the ICC to take it seriously. Needless to say, if they did not act on it now, it would certainly raise a lot of questions in world opinion as to why they haven't. So the complaint does represent something of a challenge, but we'll have to see if they rise to the challenge.
I don't know if you were able to see the recent incident where Dr. Tedros on WHO forum was doing work for the TPLF from the diocese of the office, where he was mentioning political support for TPLF. And neither the WHO nor any other country objected. Even the internal investigation, I don't know if they call it IG, of the WHO, didn't look at that and say this is a conflict of interest. So if we look at all that, and given that the TPLF leaders, most of them are roaming free, those who are still alive, many Ethiopians think that while the complaints will increase the level of conscience of the crimes committed by TPLF and its leadership, the legal avenue is unlikely. Actually, they may say it is an obstacle for national reconciliation. What would you say to that?
Well, of course, there are now a number of TPLF officials who have met justice, and the government does have an arrest list and has issued arrest warrants for many, many other TPLF officials. So there are judicial efforts in motion right now to bring the other TPLF leadership to justice. There are still, I think, some middle level and many lower level TPLF officials who are not yet the subject of these warrants, but certainly the big fish, as we say in America, are all subjects of Ethiopian prosecution. Tedros, however, is the one exception, which is why I included him in the complaint to the ICC. As far as his abuse on behalf of the TPLF during the recent law enforcement operation, first of all, I'm not aware that anyone has filed a complaint with the ICC regarding that. I'm not even sure if that falls under the definition of an international crime as defined in the Rome Statute. That's a very technical legal question that would have to be studied. As far as whether the World Health Organization itself would discipline him, that is unlikely. The WHO is governed by what's called the World Health Assembly, which is the member states. And it's true that China has a great deal of influence within the World Health Assembly, and I don't think that they were about to really take an issue about what he's been doing recently. But that is really a different question than whether he committed crimes under the Rome Statutes. So they really are a little bit different, legally speaking.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard back anything from the ICC, or they're still looking into the complaint?
They're still looking into it. Haven't heard back yet.
Okay. Do you think the complaint and also the potential charges against the other leaders in Ethiopia will strengthen national reconciliation by providing facts and also the cruel incidents perpetrated by TPLF?
Well, national reconciliation is very important, but so is justice. It is an internal Ethiopian matter what political decisions should be made with respect to reconciling. However, I don't think that you can really base long-term peace on impunity. And you have a number of top TPLF officials who did commit terrible crimes, and there has to be some form of accountability for those crimes if there are going to be any international standards of civility at all. It's really up for the Ethiopian courts to decide what sanctions should be given out, for the crimes that were committed. But I think to try to close one's eyes and pretend nothing happened and deny all of the victims any sense of justice is not going to foster reconciliation either. So I think that reconciliation is important, but it cannot come at the expense of justice. And the job of the government is going to be to balance the two. You can't go all the way in one direction, all the way in the other. But certainly you cannot let people who engaged in mass murder get away with it, because then that will just encourage other mass murderers.
Mm-hmm. A couple of technical questions. One is, I'm not sure, but if my recollection serves me well, Ethiopia is not signatory to the ICC. So can the ICC jurisdiction apply to Ethiopia?
Yes. There are two clauses in the Rome Statute which could give the ICC jurisdiction. The first one is called the effects doctrine. And what that means is if the criminal's conduct affected another country which is a member of the Rome Treaty, then the ICC can have jurisdiction. And the complaint, which, by the way, anybody can read by going on the website of Money, Blood, and Conscience and clicking on the tab which says Author's Blog. You'll find the complaint there. It says it's titled Communication. But basically, the complaint does allege that Tedros's crimes did affect other countries which were signatories to the Rome Statute. There were Ethiopian security forces that went into surrounding African countries who were members and abused and kidnapped Ethiopian citizens while they were on the soil of these other African member states. There were Ethiopians who were injured or traumatized by the security forces who are now residents in some of these foreign member states. Foreign aid to Ethiopia was wasted and abused in part because of crimes to which Tedros contributed. So I believe there is a case for jurisdiction based on the effects doctrine. Then there is potentially a second basis for ICC jurisdiction, but that depends on whether the Ethiopian government requests the ICC to take jurisdiction over Tedros just for his case alone without Ethiopia otherwise becoming a signatory to the treaty. That's called ad hoc jurisdiction. And that requires that the Ethiopian government lodge or file a formal request with the ICC saying, in effect, we are not signatories to the Rome Statute, but please, for this one specific case, we would like you to take over jurisdiction. So if the Ethiopian government does that, then that will create a second basis for ICC jurisdiction. So there's already one confirmed basis, the effects doctrine, and there is potentially a second basis, which would be the ad hoc jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm. Another technical question, which may be a simple answer: do you have standing, or does any one individual have a standing to bring a complaint to ICC?
Yes, it's much like going to the police. Anyone can bring a complaint. It's a matter of the evidence. The evidence has to stand on its own. So anyone could bring the complaint, but they also have to come in, with a very good case. The complaint that I filed is something like 20 pages long. It's detailed. It has evidence. So I'm hoping that the dossier that I submitted, which again, as I mentioned, people can read on the book's website, they'll see for itself that it is pretty detailed. So it's not a question of who brought the complaint, but what's in the complaint.
So if we take it one step further ahead, supposing the ICC does find merit in the complaint and decide to pursue it, who will be the party that will be responsible to collect the proof? You or ICC prosecutors or the Ethiopian government?
If the ICC accepts the complaint, they will open their own formal investigation. Once they open their investigation, their own investigators will be reaching out to the Ethiopian government, to human rights organizations, to Tedros's victims. They will be acting just as a police detective would do. The public, of course, will be welcome to send evidence into them, which will, go into the file. But it will then be the investigators who will then be doing the homework to turn the complaint into a formal legal case.
Mm-hmm. I guess I want to go back to why Dr. Tedros. I mean, for those of us who follow Ethiopia, there are more responsible or more criminal, people who are more responsible for the criminal activities, like the former head of security, Getachew Assefa. We can also talk about some within the military and the security apparatus. So some Ethiopians and some Tigrayan Ethiopians, might feel like you chose to complain against Dr. Tedros because of his high visibility as a WHO director. Otherwise, you would have brought the complaint against the whole TPLF leadership, and maybe specifically to those in the security and in the military establishment.
The ICC has a rule that they will not consider defendants who are already the subject of the judicial process in their own country. Originally, I had intended to include, I think it was, there were dozens of other TPLF officials. However, while the complaint was being prepared, the law enforcement operation began and the government released its list of TPLF officials whom the Ethiopian government had issued arrest warrants for. So when I saw that the Ethiopian government was already pursuing those individuals, I knew the ICC would not consider them, so I took them off the complaint. However, Tedros, for whatever reason, was the only one, at least among the biggest offenders, who the government did not have on the list. So that's why the list remained with Tedros alone. Now, I believe there are still, quite a few mid-level TPLF officials, for example, who tortured people, who are not necessarily yet on the government's arrest lists. So unless they do go on those arrest lists in future, there could conceivably still be a new complaint to the ICC that will include their names, or they might be added to the present one. But basically, the bottom line is, if the European government is already after them, then the ICC won't. So that's why Tedros is the only one who's on there at present.
Has Dr. Tedros individually or the WHO as an organization responded to the complaint? Have they provided any statements denying, or any sort of a statement from either him as an individual or from the organization?
I gave the WHO an opportunity to respond, and they declined to respond. However, some of the news reports that have been published state that Dr. Tedros has denied the allegations. So that's all I know about it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for many people, I guess I am with sort of the conservatives in America. These international organizations are very opaque. They have no accountability. WHO is a very huge organization that failed when it came to the coronavirus, and also when you look at it, it has no guts to enforce its own internal rules. Before we finish, would you like to make a closing statement?
Yes. I actually have a couple of comments I'd like to make. There's a connection between what Tedros did in Ethiopia and the suspicions surrounding his conduct with China during the early days of the COVID outbreak. As you know, many people suspect that he colluded with China to downplay the danger of the Wuhan outbreak, and many people believe that that contributed to the pandemic getting out of control and, of course, killed many people. So the question as to whether or not he did collude with China is a very important one. And I believe it's very important that what he did in Ethiopia be well publicized, because when one understands that he engaged in similar types of cover ups in Ethiopia, that shows that there was already a wider pattern of this type of behavior, which makes the probability that he did the same thing with China much higher. It's not as though what happened with China was a one-time incident which might be explained away. In fact, it's simply a continuation of a behavioral pattern that he has been demonstrating for years. And it's very important that the West be made to understand this in order to realize how dangerous it is for an international criminal to be running the world's largest public health agency. And I will confess that is one of the reasons why the publicity that's attended the complaint has been so helpful, because it's played a large role in warning the world about the type of person that's in control of this very important and influential organization, so that people can be warned um, about how dangerous it is to leave him there, and hopefully that will encourage the Health Assembly, the World Health Assembly, not to re-elect him in 2022. The other thing I'd just like to say is I'd like to make an appeal to the Ethiopian public generally to encourage Westerners to read Money, Blood, and Conscience, because it's a way to help Westerners understand the background to the current crisis and the current events. And after Westerners read this, they'll understand the justification for the law enforcement operation which the government recently was forced to launch against Tigray, and against the TPLF, I should say. And it will also help Westerners to understand the necessity for a great deal of international support and understanding of the crisis that Ethiopia is presently going through. So I do ask every Ethiopian who may be listening, please to ask all your Western friends or co-workers, please to read Money, Blood, and Conscience, which they can find on Amazon. So thank you very much for all of that.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate your work, and I also thank you very much for loving Ethiopia. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Ethiopians are wonderful people, so they're easy to love.
Thank you. That has been Insight for today. Thank you for watching. See you next time.